6 p.m. to 8 p.m. here on New Era TT Radio, Net Radio.
Welcome to DriveTime Exchange. As rubber hits the road, hard talk meets great music. Monday to Thursday, 4 to 6 p.m. on Net Radio. Taking you
so we want just go to a place I know better.
Come for holiday.
So we want I would love my country forever, yeah.
And with that, we invite you inside of the DriveTime Exchange. Of course, you are listening to the Era TT Radio, the heartbeat of the Caribbean. And of course, we take you above and beyond as we welcome everybody to the DriveTime Exchange. And right. And of course, this is where we are led by none other than our journalist extraordinaire, Andy Johnson. Andy, good afternoon to you.
Hi, good afternoon, Charles. How are you?
Actually, I'm pretty good, you know. I'm enjoying the little mix of the weather these days.
Yeah, I thought you were going to say the mix of the music, which I have been.
Well, I always enjoy that part.
Which I've been enjoying in the last hour or so. But thanks a lot. Let me just invite everybody to stay with us here on New Era Radio. We have two critical, I would say, juicy discussions on this edition of the program. In the 5 o'clock hour, we'll be talking with Dr. Kirk Meighoo. He's raised a kind of firestorm by writing a piece which appeared in the press days ago saying that, disputing this idea that Dr. Williams was the country's first prime minister. And he went back to the days of when we had the Federation. And of course, the Federation was a grouping made up of a lot of the countries in the Caribbean, most of them being former British colonies, as we are Barbados and Jamaica and so on. And so you had that. The Federation, right, was announced 1958. Mr. Bustamante was in fact the president of that, but on independence, August 31st, 1962, when we became independent, Dr. Williams became the prime minister, and there'd been a lot of discussions and disagreements in the period between 58 and 62. But Williams became the country's, as a country, with its own autonomy at the point, he became the prime minister of that. And it's interesting as to Dr. Meighoo may have sought to raise this issue. We try and get that from him when we speak in the next hour or so. But in the first hour, we're talking to Mr. Brother Ako Mutota. Again, a matter having to do with solidarity, if you want to call it that, among countries and peoples in the region. He belongs to an organization that has mounted what they call a program in solidarity with Haiti and Cuba. And the question is why? What are the sort of legs under which, on top of which this strategy and this commitment, this initiative lies, Haiti and Cuba? Well, we know some of what has been transpiring in Haiti for a couple of decades, at least in the current period. And there seems to be no end in sight to terrorism that is largely locally bred in Haiti. How many governments have changed, how many leaders of the country either had to flee or do things to save their life. to preserve their lives in a period of decades. The question is, with Haiti? So we'll be talking about that, and then Cuba, of course, as a country that is where issues about democracy and freedom and freedom of movement, freedom of assembly, and freedom of choice in a lot of respects, and on political viewpoints also are major issues undergirding the leadership of Cuba. And so we'll get to that when we talk with Dr. Mutota. Not sure if he's in the frame yet. If he is, good afternoon, sir.
Dr. Mutota?
Yeah, I thought Dr. Mutota was there. I think I'm seeing him coming up.
Yeah, he's here.
Speaking.
Yeah.
Good afternoon.
I'm seeing him, and he's seeing us. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Dr. Mutota, I don't know if you're hearing us. I don't know if on your side, if there's a mute on your microphone.
Yeah, he's talking. It's not coming through.
Yeah, so for some reason I'm not hearing him. If you can you check like on your laptop to see if your microphone is on, actually on the microphone on the laptop of itself? Because you're seeing him like he's speaking. Yeah. But we're just not hearing him on the setup itself, but we are seeing his video.
Yeah, I'm seeing somebody trying to assist him with the audio.
Yeah, because I'm seeing the microphone as if it's on, but I don't know if it on the setting on the laptop, if it's if the setting on the microphone is down for some reason.
And he keeps talking. Okay, I'm hearing a voice. Sometimes the technology could play tricks on you.
Yeah, so I don't know what's all right, so
And maybe you could play some music while they try to sort it out.
Yeah, right, we're trying to sort out that situation.
So you want I would love my country forever, yeah.
Sugar Island, sweet sunny island. My homeland is sweet for soul. Island, my sugar island, sweet precious island. I would never let you go, no. Sipping 1919 and gas to ride. My hands sweet for soul. Island roti, rice and coachella. My hands sweet for soul. Curried wild meat mixed like hot pepper. My hands sweet for soul. It's pure and healthy coconut water. Come for a holiday. Get some sunshine therapy. Melt all of the stress away. Move on to a better day. Come for a holiday. Live my sweet insanity. Jump onto it till you say, Lord bless the sweet land I pray. Island, my sugar island, sweet sunny island. My homeland is sweet for soul.
All right, so let's try and see if Dr. Mutota, are you hearing us? And is it any better where you are right now? Okay, he went back off again. I think what I will do, Andy, I'll probably try and get him on the phone.
Okay. All right.
Every day's a blessed day. I lost my reality. Man was meant to live this way.
My sugar island, sweet sunny island.
My homeland is sweet from island. My sugar island. My sweet sunny island. Yeah. I will never let you go.
Oh, ever leave this feeling of pride.
Yes, God's country that can't be denied. Oh,
Stand firm and free, walk inside my side.
the neighbors are we love and be your guide. Yeah.
Oh, come holiday, cruise outside so heavenly. Silent Buddhist therapy, definitely God's country. Yeah.
Holiday. Bring a friend, yes, it's okay. Take a dip and sweet sorbet. Wash all your troubles away.
My sugar island, sweet sunny island.
Sweet, sweet day.
My homeland is sweet for
Island, my sugar island. Sweet sunny island. I would never, never let you go.
So we are one day's not a place on a better. These islands sweet.
So you want I would love my country forever.
These islands sweet. Say we are one day's not a place on a better. These islands
So
sweet.
we want I love my country forever.
Oh, come for holiday. All of we is family. My people are so friendly. Check out the bird sanctuary.
Come for a holiday. Fly on BWI.
Say we are one day's not a place on a better.
So you want I would love my country forever. Yeah.
All right, so let's do this all over again as we welcome everybody to the DriveTime Exchange here on New Era TT Radio. So, Andy, we are back inside. I have Dr. Mutota on the phone because someone's giving him a little problem there. All right, so Andy, you're okay where you are, right?
Oh, yes.
Okay, no problem. And Dr. Mutota, are you hearing Andy okay?
Yeah, so let me, yes, I'm hearing him.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Good to have you.
Likewise, thank you for inviting me.
So let's talk about, I saw this thing being advertised or promoted somewhere in one of the formats here, whether it was on WhatsApp or what, in solidarity with Haiti and Cuba. And I just was curious to hear what's behind it. So, and you were a person who was referenced to talk about it.
Yes, so let me correct Sir Charles. Sir Charles know that many times I listen to him on the radio while driving from the hour where I live. I am not Dr. Mutota. I have no particular qualifications.
my apologies. Sorry about that.
So I would begin by saying that to quote the great American Cabral, I'm a simple African man doing my duty in the context of my time. So a lot of my work comes through that sense of civic responsibility to my country and to my people and to humanity. So let me correct that. Relative to the question you asked, Andy, why did we do this solidarity event? And let me begin by saying it is part of a year-long set of activities we have been engaged in or organized to support Haiti and to express solidarity with the people of Haiti. The most recent one, we included Cuba because of particular incidents or statements that have been coming out of the U.S. State Department relative to the false accusations that the Cuban medical brigades are in fact what you may call encouraging human trafficking or a process of human trafficking. So that's why we included Cuba in the last one. However, the situation with Haiti specifically, we have been doing it because in the Caribbean, we live in a kind of what I call a narrative bubble, in the sense that we barely get any accurate information and progressive information on what happens in the Caribbean. We know more about what happens in Miami or in London than we know what is happening in the Caribbean. And usually, what we hear is tainted by the perspective of the media from the metropolitan states, the United States or European states. So we do not have a Caribbean perspective or an accurate perspective on what is happening in the rest of the Caribbean. And Haiti has been very much a victim of what I call this narrative of war, of anti-Haitian kind of propaganda. So to understand it better, or contextualize it, if one may say so, one has to go back to the famous statement by the propagandist of Adolf Hitler, Joseph Goebbels, who said that, if you tell a big lie long enough, people tend to believe it. And what has been happening is that a number of lies, both big and small, have been told and have been perpetrated against both Haiti and Cuba, without understanding some of the underlying issues that impact Haiti, for example. Now, the current situation in Haiti can be traced directly to the overthrow of the Aristide regime or the Aristide government, right? Because for a number of years, Haiti was one occupied by the United States from 1915 to 1934, or close to 20 years. And a lot of people are not aware what happened during that period. What happened during that period was that the United States occupied Haiti, changed its constitution to allow foreigners to own land, because in the original Haitian constitution established in 1804, there was a clause that permitted foreigners, especially European foreigners, not necessarily Caribbean foreigners, from owning land. And so when the US occupied Haiti, one of the first things it did was to change the constitution to suit American interests. And from then on, the United States engaged in a process of demonizing Haiti. After the occupation ended, the US presence did not end. What subsequently happened was that through Citibank, what we now know as Citibank, it was called, I think, National Citibank then, the United States, on the advice of Citibank, actually controlled the finances of Haiti. Okay? Seriously controlled the finances of Haiti. And anything that the Haitian government, and they set up puppet governments, and anything that the Haitian governments wanted to do literally had to pass through Citibank in order to service the people of Haiti. Following that, the United States supported a dictatorship, the Duvalier dictatorship, right, for a number of years. It moved from his father, Francois Duvalier. Did you say something? I heard
that's the man familiarly known as
Papa Doc. Yeah, Papa Doc. And then after he died, the powers were transferred to his son. So
yeah,
a lot of what has happened in Haiti has to do directly with the U.S. interference, right, and the U.S. capture of the elites and the government of that particular country. And so Haiti has experienced, because of this interference and other kinds of covert operations against the people of Haiti, has been involved or experienced, what you may say, a series of political instability. But you do not trace that back in terms of the narrative to what the US did. What is propagated is that these people are evil because they practice voodoo, they are corrupt, and all the other what I call propagandized information that the US is prone to do when it wants to undermine and when it wants to pursue interests that it thinks serves itself. And so this is why we decided we wanted to explain to people what Haiti is, and not only what has happened in Haiti, but what historically Haiti means to the Caribbean and to the world. Haiti represents the first ex-slave country to free itself from slavery and establish a liberated state. It fought every major European power and defeated them, the Germans, the French, everyone. By setting that example, the Western powers never forgave Haiti, because the United States, at the time Haiti became independent in 1804, was a slave society. And many of the southern planters felt that if news of Haiti's liberation or independence got to these slaves in the United States, it could create havoc in the US. And so from the very beginning, the United States set about the task of the destruction of Haiti, both by overt means and covert means, and both by propaganda and what I call this construction of narrative. So what we decided that we had to do as a necessary part of our solidarity is to create information that would deconstruct the false narrative that exists about Haiti, and to give people some kind of information about the reality of what is happening in Haiti. Relative to Cuba, again, ever since the Cuban Revolution came to power in 1959, the United States has been an arch enemy of the Cuban government and subsequently the Cuban people. Because before the Cuban Revolution of 1959, Cuba was more or less an American colony. And the revolution changed and transformed Cuba from basically a US colony to a sovereign state. And this is the issue here. Both Cuba and Haiti have this particular thing in common, that they fought revolutions in order not only to establish independence and liberation, but sovereignty. And that is an important thing that I think in Trinidad and Tobago we do not understand, because I think if we understood this, the recent statements by the government relative to Venezuela would not have been made. In other words, we have compromised our sovereignty in so many different ways, but I don't even think we understand our sovereignty. It's a very important statement Sierra made, I think it was some years ago, in looking at our state as a country. And he said, we are celebrants at our own funeral. And I think we don't understand that by taking these kinds of what I call subservient position to US foreign policy, that we are celebrating the demise and the death of our own sovereignty and independence as a nation and as a people. You know, I liken the US intervention in the affairs of other states, and those of us from a different era would have known about a man called Manu Benjamin, or who they used to call the Beast of Bish, who was a sadistic man who inflicted a lot of sadistic treatment of two women and was jailed for life. Well, to me, that is how the United States is when you look at its record around the world. It has told lie after lie to justify the intervention and to perpetrate crimes of humanity against other peoples, from Vietnam to Iraq to Haiti to the Dominican Republic to Guyana in 1953, when they did not like the policies that Chedi Jagan was pursuing under the PPP. And so the US and the British intervened and overthrew and arrested the leadership of people like Chedi Jagan and UC Quayana. And this was a democratically elected government. So to believe the propaganda and the narrative that the US propagates about democracy and freedom and so on. This is a country that when it wrote its constitution, right, wrote in the constitution, all men are created equal, but African Americans were deemed 3/5 humans. Right? It was not until the civil rights movement that some kind of restorative justice took place. So for our leadership, and especially our intellectual leadership, I saw two of our political scientists, as I said, done with the program. I mean, when I look at what we have become as a country, you know, people like to say we are a democracy, and I said, no, we are not a democracy. I said that last week in a discussion. We are what is called a kakistocracy. And for those who don't understand what a kakistocracy is, it's leadership by the least capable and qualified people in terms of morality and understanding of what international relations are. And that is what our country's leadership and our elites are. Right? This is why we are in the state where the country is falling apart. I was listening to your program just now, and I'm hearing that we have to put policemen in schools. I mean, as one person said, we are a failed state. If we have to put policemen in schools, we are a failed state. It means that the policies that we have initiated are failed. But I don't want to deviate, even though all things are related, because we want to speak about this issue of Haiti and Cuba. But it relates to why we do the things we do with Haiti and Cuba, because people are misinformed. And in Trinidad and Tobago, we are also misinformed, especially those who we consider leadership. We are misinformed. And therefore, we initiate policies, we take positions that is based on this information, this misinformation that can affect our population negatively. Hello?
Yeah. Andy?
I wanted to find if you have another question. I know I've been talking for a while.
I kind of temporarily lost Andy. In the meantime, just give me one more.
Yeah.
You get me?
Yeah, I'm hearing you now.
I'm hearing you now. Yes.
All right, because I lost you a moment ago. All right, but I mean, you know, so you were talking about the events that recorded as which led to the isolation of Haiti by various U.S. administrations. That's where I lost you.
Well, it's not just isolation. Yes, isolation is part of it. But more than anything else, it's the false narratives, the lies that have been told about Haiti and Cuba. And the most recent one is this idea that the Cuban medical missions, or what we call the medical brigades, are sources of human trafficking. Now, you know, we all know, those of us who know that is false. But the US propagates this as an idea, and unfortunately, some people believe, and in fact, they have pressurized governments in the Caribbean to delink themselves from that particular project in Cuba. I think one government in the Caribbean has already succumbed to US pressure, and from what reports we have been getting, another one is kind of tottering. Some have stated very clearly that they will not rescind the program or end it. And in one instance, the minister in Grenada, in the Grenadian government, who supported the program publicly, his visa and his diplomatic status, as well as his wife's visas and so on, were revoked, simply because they stated that the Cuban medical missions were good for the people of Grenada. And so this is bullying. And so the idea that the United States stands for democracy and freedom, and it's a myth. The history of the United States does not suggest that at all. You know, from when slavery ended to what is called Jim Crow, which was a legalized form of discrimination in the United States, to the terror meted out against the civil rights and other organizations struggling for black people in the US to have the same rights as whites. This is the United States. And fundamentally does not change. If you look at the Trump policies directly attacks people of color. You know, there were those in the Hispanic community who felt they had some kind of privileged status, so they're realizing now, no, it is actually a war against people of color. And Make America Great Again is basically a kind of suggestion, if you want to call that, to make America white again. That is what it is. And this has been the policy of the United States in both subtle and not so subtle ways, in both overt and covert ways. And we have to understand this is where we are. As one person said, the United States does not have any permanent friends. What they have is permanent interests. And we have to understand that as a policy. And at times, you know, we have made statements that seems not to understand that reality, that could compromise our country in significant ways. Yes, you must maintain diplomatic relations. It is the hegemon in the Western Hemisphere. It is a powerful country and so on. But Lord Best taught us one thing, that size does not matter. What we must understand is our comparative advantages. And if we work on the development of our comparative advantages, then we'll be in a position to advance and to progress as we are capable of. You know, and so in looking at the situation with Haiti and Cuba, and returning to that issue, we felt it absolutely necessary to inform the people of Trinidad and Tobago and the rest of the Caribbean, because our programs are connected to people in the rest of the Caribbean, to explain to people that what you see in the media is not necessarily the reality of what is happening in Cuba and Haiti. And I will tell you this, I have been to Cuba more than once. I went to Cuba in the 1980s. I was in the revolutionary movement in Trinidad. And so I was considered a fairly conscious person, an informed person. And when I went to Cuba, my propagandized mind still didn't understand what was happening. Even though I supported the Cuban Revolution, when I went there, I still was looking for a militarized state. And I spent 2 weeks in Cuba looking for military people walking all over the streets, and I didn't see it. I saw people going to dinner, people playing sports, families going out, going to concerts. That's what I saw, a regular society. People trying to live and exist as humans should. And so I had this idea that I would be seeing troops in the streets, and so even though I was considered a fairly conscious person. And so if you understand that a person who was informed as I was then, having certain kinds of distorted perceptions, understand what is happening to the mass of people. And this is why we do these events in solidarity, to give a different perspective and to offer alternative information about issues that we think are necessary and important, necessary to understand and important to the Caribbean.
All right, so you debunk the idea that there's no freedom of expression, freedom of choice in Cuba. In Haiti, the situation is that governments don't last for any time. The revolts come from the Haitian citizens, and so you're saying all of those things are the result of destabilization by the major powers, in this case, in the United States and countries.
In Haiti, it is absolutely destabilization, right? It is absolutely, because when Jacques-Bertrand Aristide came to power as the first elected, legitimately elected president in Haiti, possibly its entire history, the United States overthrew that government, and in collaboration with the Europeans, because Aristide made a statement that everybody felt caused his demise. He demanded that Haiti be repaid the money that France collected from it for abolishing slavery. And he demanded that that money be repatriated to Haiti. And so that was basically the end of him. Under protest, he was returned, and they subsequently overthrew him again. So the point I and others have made from observing the situation is that the current crisis in Haiti stems from the fact that there was a fracture, political fracture that took place, in which the legitimate government voted by the people was removed from power, and a number of puppet regimes were put in place. And that is the position based on all the evidence that exists. And what was the other question you asked? You asked about Cuba?
Well, yeah, and the extent to which there's no institutional kind of freedom of speech and expression in Cuba either. Some people that's what I mean. I've been to Cuba once. I've been to Haiti 3 times. I don't know if it's sufficient to make judgments on what my observations are. But the question is that you say these things were fostered, and not that when the governments changed in Haiti, it was because the people felt that they weren't getting what they deserved and moved from one group to the other, or one party to the other. And in Cuba, elections, what transpires there is different from, so let's take the rest of the Caribbean, the English-speaking Caribbean, where, governments change from time to time, and you're saying that is not allowed in those 2 countries in the Caribbean.
Well, in Haiti, governments change, but not through the legitimate aspiration of the people. Relative to Cuba, Cuba is a one-party state. Whether we agree with it or not, it's a one-party state. That is, it is led by the Cuban Communist Party. Relative to us in the Caribbean, we are supposed to have democratic societies in which we have elections every 5 years and so on and so forth. Now, what we have is what is referred to as a representative democracy, in which we vote one party in, and then supposedly after 5 years, if we disagree with the policies of the one party, then we change the other. But in reality, I don't know that in my lifetime that my country has changed in any significant way. We have argued when I was a member of the National Joint Action Committee, and that was part of the motivation and inspiration for the revolution of 1970, that the political system and the economic system failed the people and were not living up to the expectations of the people. We had an economic system that was predominantly dominated by or controlled by foreign multinationals. We had a political system where young people felt very alienated. Now, we have advocated, rather than a representative democracy, that we introduce a participatory democracy, in which people, for example, have the right to recall politicians who don't serve their interests. So the Cubans, from their point of view, believe that they have a state in which the citizen can participate from the grassroots level up to the highest level. Just recently in Cuba, and Cuba is going through a very serious economic crisis. Just recently, I think about a month ago, there were photos of people who were begging on the street in Cuba. And the minister of government, who was in the cabinet, came out and said that was false, and there were people who were just trying to damage the reputation of Cuba. And she was fired for not speaking the truth. And I don't know that in our country that in any significant way that can happen. I mean, we have had in our country, and this is why I said it's a catastrophe, we have had all kinds of levels of corruption in which people have been jailed in the US, and the people who are accused and who partners in this thing are still running around freely, constantly being their cases being extended and appealed. So we speak of this democracy as if it is sacrosanct, based on this model of elections every 5 years. But what has it done for our country? I mean, I live in Mayaro, and it's a disgrace to drive on the road from San Fernando to Princeton or from Sandy Grande to Mayaro. This is after 60 years of independence and trillions of dollars of oil wealth. So when we speak of democracy, what has it delivered in a concrete way for the people, in any significant way for the people of Trinidad today? Free education, okay, yes, right? But look at what is happening in our schools now. Okay, we have a situation where we have a crime situation that the police seem inadequate to solve. But every year we go through this ritual and say, well, okay, we will vote for this party or vote for that party, but nothing qualitatively changes. What we have quantitative changes and nothing qualitatively changes.
So
this is why in our generation, we ask for the system to change, and I still believe that we need to change the system.
Wow. When you say legally, what do you mean? And when you say change, what do you mean? Because I'm trying to ask you whether you think we will benefit from autocracy, because how do we get from here to there?
Well, what is autocracy? You know, there is a saying: one man's terrorist or another man's revolutionary.
Yeah. So
when we talk about autocracy and all, these are just words. I mean, words to me that people use to describe situations that they either disagree with or to oppose ideas that they think they don't want to see applied. So we say democracy, but what does it really mean when we say democracy? To the average man in the street, what does it really mean? What does democracy mean? We, for example, at one point in time, believe that the greatest democracy was the United States. And now what people are telling you based on what they are seeing, the United States is not a democracy in the real sense of it. It's a one-party system with two wings. They pursue the same policy of war, the same policy of transferring wealth to the rich and making the 1% richer. Okay? The same policy of attacking workers and constantly diminishing the rights of workers, whether they're Democratic or Republican. And yes, people in America vote every 4 years, but nothing changes. In fact, in the last 30 years, according to some statistics, has seen an unprecedented amount of billionaires in the United States. Unprecedented, which means that workers are producing, because you cannot acquire that kind of wealth without workers producing. But yet, workers' salaries did not increase commensurate with the amount of wealth that has been accomplished by the 1% in the society. So when we talk about democracy, we see it as a political question. What about economic democracy? What about if we contribute to the economic development of an enterprise or a state, that there is some kind of democratic procedure that will allow for the workers who produce to benefit in a significant way from that? So nobody talks about economic democracy.
You don't see any difference between the Democrats and the Republicans. That's what you're saying.
No, there is none. But there's fundamentally no difference. None. I mean, you look at the wars that have been waged, okay, and you look at the consistency of the foreign policy. So there is no change. There is no difference. You know, it is two wings of the same apparatus. You know.
Yeah.
Likewise,
we come back.
This is something we inherited, the so-called Westminster model of democracy.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
That's what we inherited.
As a parliamentary system. Yes.
Democracy. Well, it tells you everything. It was built in Westminster to function for Westminster. You know, what is our version of this? How do we, as Trinidadians and Tobago citizens of this country, how do we interpret a democracy that is rooted in our own reality? We have had institutions, okay, that that are very democratic, indigenous institutions. Like, for example, if you look at something like what we call the Susan economic institution, it's a very democratic institution, right? In fact, one historian suggests that the cacique which is the indigenous system of governance in this part of the world.
Yes.
Haitian historian Dr. Baina Bello said that the cacique was not a person, it wasn't a king, which is misrepresented in history, that the cacique was actually a council made up of men and women. So, which means this was an institution that existed before the advent of the Europeans. So, we have systems in our indigenous history that we could borrow from. The point is that I'm not saying that all things of the past are relevant or we have to go back, because that is what we call irrelevant traditionalism, right? We must embrace modernization, but we must not forsake our own methods and methodologies and our own creation in the embrace of modernization. This is what we have done too many times as ex-colonies in the Caribbean. So we're not saying that we are anti-democratic, but we're asking what kind of democracy are we going to continue?
What the people would accept?
That was imposed on us, that has not worked for us, or are we going to look at something different that reflects our own reality and our own history?
So that is a suggestion for us to rethink what we consider to be our democracy. But I want to go back to the thing about the solidarity with Cuba and Haiti. You know how that is being expressed. How is it to be expressed, such that people? And you're talking about mostly those of us outside of those countries, right? As to how we take a different look at what's happening there.
Yeah, well, we need to know. We need to inquire, and that is one of the things I've found that is sadly lacking in Trinidad and Tobago now. I think people have lost the sense of inquiry. We no longer want to know. Just as how we eat packaged food, and so we get packaged information, and so we don't question what is around us. And what we try to do through these events that we have is to get people to question, to seek alternatives, and that is the most fundamental aspect, I think, of what we do. People need to ask more questions, ask why. If you look at the case of Venezuela, for example, a lot of people have bought into the idea of demonizing Maduro's government. When if you look at the statistic, the Venezuelan government has one of the best records against drug trafficking. It's significantly less drugs pass through Venezuela and Colombia, period. And yet, right now, we have a situation in the Caribbean where the U.S. has forces in the Caribbean under the pretext that drug trafficking is taking place in Venezuela, and the U.S. is there to prevent it. When
I could be wrong, but I've read stuff over certainly the last elections in Venezuela, and there were many instances in which people were frustrated to cast their ballots in areas that were said to be not on the side of Maduro and his team. So you have those things as well. Polling booths closing long before the time they're supposed to close, and what was happening with people trying to vote in some areas where it was felt that Maduro was not popular. And you think these things are manufactured?
Well, they may in fact exist. I haven't been to Venezuela in a while, and so I can't say with any degree of certainty that is so. It is not so. But I have lived in the U.S. up to recently, and I've seen the same thing in the U.S. Are we then going to say that the U.S. government is illegitimate? This guy who was the former governor of New York, Cuomo, he made a very interesting statement some years ago. He said that capitalism has not solved the problem of poverty in the U.S.
Andrew Cuomo.
Is that the capitalist system?
Yeah.
So we
Andrew
are
Cuomo, right?
Because the American system prides itself on being a capitalist system. It has facilitated homelessness, poor healthcare services. And he asked the question, are we, because of those flaws, going to change the US system? And no, the reporter didn't answer. So the point is, even though there may be contradictions or whatever may be the flaws in the Venezuelan system, on more than one occasion, even from President Carter, who has been to Venezuela on more than one occasion and supervised the election, he has claimed very emphatically, it is documented, that is one of the best electoral systems in the world. But I was not there, he said it. So I'm not saying that there may not be flaws or whatever in the system, but a number of observers who are not necessarily supporters of Venezuela have vouched that this is one of the best electoral systems. And as I said, in the United States, we have had in the elections that just passed, there were significant problems. And not only that, there was terrorism and intimidation to prevent people from voting. So yes, we want to talk about Venezuela as a developing country, and I'm not defending it in that sense of saying it is right or wrong. I am saying when you make the comparison, also make the comparison of what the United States have done for over 100 years, in which it eliminated and discouraged and terrorized people of African descent from voting. You don't hear that in the narrative.
All right, so
after 250 years almost of being an independent republic, its electoral and economic system still has many flaws that disenfranchise people. So if we are going to criticize Venezuela for its own contradictions, which it is our right to do, also do the same to the United States with the same consistency and vehemence that we did, but we don't. And this is where the demonization comes in. We don't compare apples to apples. And
but you don't think that you don't think that there are people who make a difference between the Democrats and the Republicans? If you talk about Carter, for instance, I mean, he died recently, and all kinds of he was held in all kinds of praises as to the kind of president he was to say that Donald Trump will ever be, with their flaws and all of that, and the Democrats seem to have in some cases a different approach to addressing some of the issues than the Republicans. But I wanted to we're gonna have to close up, but I wanted to end therefore on going back to Cuba and Haiti. What are some of the distinct things that your group is doing to enhance this solidarity, and how purposeful you think it is going forward?
For the time being, what we have been of public events in collaboration with religious institutions, bookstores, and a lot of them are virtual, to promote alternative views, to provide information on Haiti. For example, I co-host a program, a radio program in Belize with another person, and we have a segment 15 minutes before in which we provide news around the Caribbean. So those are some of the things we are doing. We promote news. In other words, if we get a Reuters view on something, we also promote the view from Cuba or from Venezuela. So you get two views. Like, for example, last week we read the statement from the Venezuelan Foreign Ministry and the Cuban Foreign Ministry. So we are providing information that emanates out of Cuba and Haiti. We are in touch with a number of Haitian organizations. One of the organizations we work with is the Haiti Action Committee, which is a 34-year-old Haiti support organization. They have an organization called the Haiti Relief Fund, in which they support projects in Haiti. So those are some of the things we are doing. Relative to Cuba, we work with some of the Cuba friendship societies around the Caribbean. And other people who visit Cuba. Just recently, we collaborated with an academic who had never been to Cuba. In Cuba, they were amazed by what they saw, what they experienced in Cuba. So they created a online social media project called Operation Carlota. And it was called Operation Carlota. It was named after an African female slave who led a slave revolt in Cuba. And so they have this social media campaign named after Carlota. But Carlota was also the operation that Cuba conducted in Southern Africa to defeat apartheid, and which a lot of people are forgetting. The Cuban army, together with the Angolan army and the liberation forces of Frelimo, combined to defeat the South African army that laid the way for the path of the. So this opportunity to get some of the young students who they constructed it and they are moving through the Caribbean, and we have been getting interviews on the various media in the Caribbean for them to share their experience with the Caribbean about their stay in Cuba. And I would hope that I can put them in touch with you so you may be able to interview them to hear their opinion on what their experiences were in Cuba.
By all means. And it's thanks for talking, as I say, Dr. Mutota.
Thank you, brother. Thanks for inviting me, and I hope I've been able to contribute in some way to enlightening the people about Cuba and Haiti.
Well, certainly you have. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Dr. Mutota, going back to the 1970s in Trinidad and Tobago and coming forward, so how he sees democratic activity and purposeful government and leadership, his organization, how they see that, and the things that he's talked about wanting to, how to effectively address that situation. So we're going to take a break. We hand it back to the news, and then we come back on the other side with Dr. Kirk Meighoo.
Okay, people stay here with us on New Era TT Radio. We'll be back in a short.
My homeland is sweet for soul. Islands, my sugar islands, sweet precious islands.
Your mid-morning just got better. Join Sir Charles for the mid-morning mix and mingle, where good music, real talk, health, and family matters come together, and your voice is heard. Whether you're at work, on the go, or just taking a break, this is the perfect mix to keep you engaged, informed, and entertained. The mid-morning mix and mingle, weekdays, 9 a.m. to 12 noon on New Era TT Radio, Net Radio.
S&H Rumbox, 137 Western Main Road, St. James, for all your retail and wholesale needs for alcohol and non-alcoholic beverages. Call us at 686-0599 or visit us at 137 Western Main Road, St. James. S&H Rumbox, drinking out of the box.
Advertise with us on New Era TT Radio, the fastest growing streaming platform for talk in Trinidad and Tobago. Audio and video ads welcome. Elevate your brand with us. Connect with us at newerattradio@yahoo.com or call us at 299-5156. Now what are you waiting for?
All right, everybody. So we are back inside the DriveTime Exchange right here on New Era TT Radio with Andy Johnson. And remember, people, you can get us on newerattradio.com, and we stream all day, every day. You can also get us at New Era TT Radio, so you can get us on TuneIn. That way, you'll be able to get us on your Alexa and all of your Google devices. And also, our morning shows are also carried on Gaia Caribbean TV on Amplier and Flow 107. So there are a number of ways that you can get us. All you have to do is just put in New Era and you're sure to see us coming up in your browser. All right, so Andy, we are back inside. Our guest is here, so it's all yours.
All right, thank you very much. Well, we're getting ready to talk now with Dr. Kirk Meighoo. He's created a slight firestorm within the last couple of days in some of the pieces he's written. And the particular one that sort of draws the greater fire this time around, he's saying that he's written this article saying that Dr. Eric Williams was not the first Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago. He went back through the days of of the colonies, and when we had the Federation, and who was the president then. It has raised the firestorm, but in some cases, is he being taken out of context? I want to start with that question. Good to see you, Doctor.
Yeah, hi. Good afternoon. Good afternoon.
So let's talk about that. Talk about why you felt it necessary to make that declaration and ones associated with it in a situation in which, well, generations have grown up, certainly, particularly people who were born after 1962, and to this eye, the certainty that Dr. Williams was the country's first prime minister.
Well, I mean, first of all, there are so many historical myths. So we've been misinformed so much about our history. It's just it's hard to know where to start, right? And my writing over the past 30 years in public, this is not new. This is something that's been published internationally before, and it's just standard information. But we in Trinidad and Tobago have been brainwashed by the PNM. Basically, we have people don't even know that there were elections, that we elected Grantley Adams as prime minister in 1958. It's incredible. But the point on independence is to widen. You see, there is this thing, and you see, history has become, ever since Eric Williams came on stage as the historian, he has weaponized history. He did not present an objective view of history. He presented a very political PNM view of history. Some of those things are accurate, he said, but some are not. And one of the things that the PNM have tried to do was to create this idea of Eric Williams as father of the nation, and they elevate him to almost a beyond mortal status in almost a spiritual way. If for some people they view him that way, that's fine, but not everybody does, and not everybody is supposed to. Independence, nationalism, regionalism did not start and end with Eric Williams, but that is the way it's portrayed. And so what I was trying to show is that our history is deeper and longer and wider. So Eric Williams, yes, and as I said in the article, if anybody the people who took time to read would see that, yes, from 62, Eric Williams was our prime minister. That's an indisputable fact, just as it is indisputable that in 1958, we were part of the Federation of the West Indies. The capital was here in Trinidad. I mean, the March for Chagaramas in 1960 was for the federal capital. I mean, I don't even know if people are knowing what I'm referring to. I'm sure you would know. You are well versed in history. You know about the march around the savannah and so forth. But that was for the West Indian capital, Chagaramas. And so basically, we were actually, and this is a very interesting thing, we were not supposed to be independent as Trinidad and Tobago. That we were supposed to be independent as the West Indies. And that's why people, and they're also, that's what, Federation Park with all the street names of all the
countries in the Federation, yes.
That's right. That's where the MPs lived. Just like in Washington, D.C., all the congressmen from all over the country, they live in D.C., right? Yes. So they were living in Port of Spain in Federation Park. Because the parliament was in Trinidad. So we had the Jamaican MPs, the Antiguan MPs, the Bajan MPs, they were living there. And that's how we were supposed to become independent. We had our own currency, we had our own flag. The national anthem was actually written for the West Indies Federation, not for Trinidad and Tobago, islands of the Blue Caribbean Sea, side by side we stand. This is important history, and it's been buried. Unfortunately, the PNM have buried so much of our history. People don't even know that there was a government, an elected government in Trinidad and Tobago from 1950 to 1956 before Eric Williams. They believe Eric Williams formed the first government. He didn't. Albert Gomes did. There are so many things that have been hidden in our history in order to glorify and prop up the PNM, and it's time to get rid of all that. And and independence becomes basically like a PNM celebration, but it's not. It's something much wider. More people. There was much more that was involved in independence. It wasn't a PNM affair.
So you're saying therefore that the PNM has taken and continues to take too much credit for their role.
Yeah,
and
they have hijacked. They have hijacked it, and I want to expand it and give it back to the whole country.
Yeah. If you could talk a little bit more about what transpired as to why the Federation didn't last, because that is something, growing up at the time, and going through that, I was born in 1952, so 1962 I was 10 years old,
Right.
and it had when we got independence. And then,
So do you remember the West Indian dollar and all that?
No.
No,
But,
okay, you don't
you
know.
know,
Yeah, but there was a West Indian dollar.
But I remember pounds, shillings, and pence, and you had.
Do you remember what?
Pounds, shillings, and pence.
Yeah, right. Yes.
And so on, a 6-cent piece and things like that. And, but the issue as to why the Federation didn't last.
That is, and that's something that I think leaders after 1962 have tried to bury. But basically, Bustamante was dead set against independence. He felt Jamaica was too big and that the other islands would keep them back, and they were backward. Basically, that it was an insular chauvinism, and that's accepted right across the board. I don't think anybody really disputes that. And he campaigned very, very hard. Norman Manley was for federation, but he allowed the referendum to happen under pressure from Bustamante. Many people said he shouldn't have allowed the referendum, but that's a kind of anti-democratic position. But there are many people who said he should not have done the referendum, but he did call the referendum, and so Jamaica pulled out in November. And I shared the Trinidad Guardian newspaper front page from 1961 when that happened. And they referred to the statements of the Prime Minister being it's a tragedy, the Prime Minister in Port of Spain being Grantley Adams, saying how it was a tragedy. And curiously enough, Eric Williams was not available for comment, the Premier, Eric Williams. Eric Williams was critical of the Federation himself. He believed it gave too much power to each individual island. He wanted it much more controlled by the center. And that's always been the PNM's ideology, strong central government control. That's why they're for the unitary state. They don't want a federation with Tobago. They weaken local government. They want it all under central government. Even the TTRA, up to today, that's about being under the control of the central government and not with the service commissions and so forth. The PNM have always been about things being under control of the central government. And Williams, started that. And so he had this view that, okay, if the 9 of us want to continue, it has to be different. I don't want this structure where each island has so much autonomy. It has to be under the control of the central government. Interestingly, Verbert of Antigua, he said he refused to be part of anything where Antigua would not be considered an equal partner with Trinidad. He said, "We do not want to be a little Tobago." That's ouch. That's a real criticism, but that's what they said. They didn't want to be put into the status of a Tobago, and Tobagonians, very conscious Tobagonians have been calling for federation for a very, very long time, and so these are the issues. So Williams didn't like that federal structure. He always wanted a centralized structure, and he pulled out. And there was another thing, Peter Farquhar. I don't know if you remember that name, MP Peter Farquhar.
Peter Farquhar, of course.
Yeah, very brilliant man. He was part of the Marlborough House conference as well, which negotiated the Trinidad and Tobago independence. But he was of the view, and I am inclined to agree, it sounds very plausible, that Eric Williams was in a rush to get independence because at the next heads of government meeting of the Commonwealth, he did not want Bustamante to be the only West Indian prime minister there. He also wanted to be there. And so Jamaica got their independence on the 1st of August, and we got ours on the 31st of August.
Yeah.
But it was a collapse of the federation. So there's a kind of tragedy that really what our independence is a collapse of the federation. I think that was the best option for us to go into independence as a federation, a West Indian federation. And that was the way Canada, South Africa, Australia also went into independence from being British colonies. Canada at the time was, I think, 4 different colonies. South Africa was, I think, 3, and Australia was like 6. But then they made a federation. Canada, they called it a confederation. South Africa, it was the Union of South Africa, and Australia was the Australian Federation. And then they established a federal government, and that's how they moved to independence. And that was envisaged for the West Indies. We formed a federal government. We were self-governing, and we were on the way to independence.
Yeah, as you talk about it, what comes to mind, the Mighty Sparrow had made a calypso about it. Saying,
yeah,
we don't want no Bajan prime minister. And Barbados can be capital for here. And so there were those feelings as well.
Yeah, that's right. There was a lot of debate. The 3 main contenders for the capital of the Federation was in Kingston, Bridgetown, and Port of Spain. Eventually, what was decided was Chaguaramas. But Chaguaramas was, at that time, occupied by the Americans as a military base. From World War II, the Americans were still here. And so Port of Spain was used as a temporary capital until Chaguaramas was available. And it was the Red House. They met at the Red House.
Yeah. And the question comes back that between federation and with the breakup of the federation and the inauguration of CARICOM, it appears as though some of them, Williams and Manley father and Barrow, who was in Barbados and Burnham in Guyana, felt the need to not go entirely separate, and they had to have a...
Yes and no. Well, first of all, the other islands definitely wanted, and to this day you have the Organization of Eastern Caribbean States, to the degree of integration that the rest of us don't have in the Caribbean, right? So and that's very much by virtue of their small size. So you have that. But also, what motivated CARICOM to come together too was the fact that the Lomé Convention and the sugar concessions, so that at the time every Caribbean island, was depending on guaranteed prices of sugar from the UK, and when the UK was going to join the European Union in 1972, then they had to. The Europeans were saying that the preferential treatment that the Caribbean was getting would have to be abandoned for the UK to join the EU. So it was a crisis in the Caribbean, and so they decided to get together to negotiate with the UK so those sugar preferences would not be removed. And so that was really the spur to have. First, it was CARIFTA, the Caribbean Free Trade Association, and then it was CARICOM after that. And then what had happened, actually, by 1983, CARICOM was virtually dead. They stopped meeting because the invasion of Grenada was a massive, massive dividing. And and Caribbean leaders didn't even want to meet each other anymore. Right? You had the pro-Reagan, pro-Thatcher people not wanting to meet, like Bishop or Manley, who were pro-Cuba, and then when the invasion happened after the murder of Maurice Bishop in 1983 and Bernard Cord and all that, they didn't meet for many years. I think only in 89, I believe, they came back, and that was I think it was under the insistence of A.N.R. Robinson, if I'm not mistaken, who was our prime minister at the time, with the NAR. And then they had this new kind of push for CARICOM, and that's when they were doing the single market and the single market and common external tariff, and that again was very much prompted by the EU in 1992, which eventually came up in 1992, planning to become the European Union, as opposed to what was it called before?
The EEC, the European Economic Community.
That's right. Yeah. So we went from the EEC to the European Union in 92. So as that was moving along, then Robinson was pushing for CARICOM to really get back together, retool ourselves, and re-engage, because then you had the Cotonou agreements and all that, if you remember, happening from them again with the sugar industry and the preferential treatment that we were getting from the UK being former colonies. That was being questioned by the EU. So all those things were part of the calculations and internal and external pressures for coming together in federation, and then later. And one thing about CARICOM is that it always proceeds on the basis that we don't want a federation. It's like they're scared of the idea of a federation, because they know that each island wants its own little fiefdom, as they say, as opposed to being a single unit. So there's this fear of federation. I suppose over time, as people forget that the federation existed, as those leaders have died off and so forth, maybe that fear is not as strong anymore. But it's kind of now even forgotten that that's where we were at one point.
Yeah, I want to ask you about the what happened with you mentioned it earlier on. What transpired in Grenada with Maurice Bishop, and I said to people, I was covering that as a reporter for the Express at the time. There was a summit in Trinidad. He had won the election, and in people's minds, he was being tardy about regularizing his position in the takeover, and that he had committed to holding elections within a certain period. The meeting was in Port of Spain. George Chambers was prime minister at the time, and he gave a commitment. And then he went back, and a couple of weeks later, what happened in October '83 happened. And people refer to the U.S. as having staged an invasion, but in my view, that wasn't the case, because when the government, the U.S. president at the time announced that there were U.S. forces. It was Reagan, I think I remember.
Yeah.
U.S. forces had landed in Grenada. Sitting next to him was Eugenia Childs, who was the prime minister of Dominica at the time. So that she had, I like to say, she left Port of Spain and went directly and joined an appeal to him to say that, and she used those words when she was asked about the situation in Grenada. She said, we're talking about, this is our kith and our kin, and they weren't prepared to have Bishop sort of dilly-dally about calling the election, and then he was isolated, put under house arrest, and the rest is history.
Yeah, I mean, because people don't, that's right. It's mischaracterized as an invasion. That's what had happened, and a lot of people don't know because it's been obscured. Again, this is another thing, just like our history being obscured. So what happened is that the Cord faction, which was tied to the which is more tied to the Soviet Union than actually the WPJ in Jamaica, for those of you who know the regional politics, which is the hardcore communist Soviet party. and they ordered the murder of Maurice Bishop. I mean, there's some denial about it, but they're convicted for it, and they're in jail for it. But because they felt that Maurice Bishop was too petty bourgeoisie, it was this internal Marxist kind of fighting where they didn't think Maurice Bishop was pure enough, and the population did not like that. They loved Maurice Bishop, and when Cord and his faction took over after the murder of Maurice Bishop, because they freed Maurice Bishop from the jail when he was isolated by Cord.
Yeah.
They didn't like that, and it was when he was freed, then he was murdered by the security forces. And this was just a few years after Walter Rodney was murdered in Guyana. So the country was under terror. It was really under terror. That was not the revolution they asked for. That was not the revolution they wanted. It descended into murder. It descended into like an animal farm situation, or even like Lord of the Flies or something. It descended into that. And when the U.S. came, surveys have been done. I mean, the people welcomed it. And to me, I find it very similar to what's going on now with the U.S. in the Caribbean right now. Again, we have been ravaged by narco trafficking for decades and have been unable to to stem it. And we don't have the capability. We don't have an army. We don't have a navy. And whatever the narco traffickers have certainly outguns what we do have. Of course, we all know the history of U.S. interventions and so forth. And we don't support that. What we do support, though, is the attack against narco trafficking, and that is what the U.S. government has declared, and Donald Trump himself has been against nation building in Iraq and regime change, and he's not been into that like Obama and Biden and Hillary and George Bush and Jr. and Senior and Clinton and the whole line of neocon war hawks. This is declared to be something different, right? And let's hope that it remains focused on what they say. And
you don't think that Trump is more of a war lover than those names you call out there?
Not at all. He was the only person that called out George Bush for lying on. No Democrat called out George. He called out George Bush on the campaign stage for lying about weapons of mass destruction. He's always been against all these regime change and nation building wars, all this liberal humanitarian intervention, all these regime change wars, and that's why he has Tulsi Gabbard as the Secretary of State. Tulsi Gabbard, former chairman of the DNC, head of the Bernie Sanders campaign. So she's there too, because that's what they represent. They represent a more of a nationalist strain, an isolationist strain in some ways, but that strain in American politics, which hasn't been seen for decades, because basically both Republican and Democrats were basically neoconservative, and the same thing, one or the other.
What do you make of the fact that I'm saying to people now, I'm not sure that I didn't think that there would be a time in my life where I would say that I'm not sure I want to go to the United States, because I could be walking down some street one day and I'm just picked up and then nobody knows where I am. That is what is happening.
Oh yeah, no, that's madness, really. I mean, what's going on there is really chaotic, and it is something quite concerning. But the U.S., I mean, that's their internal politics, and it's not for our government to tell their government what to do.
Yeah. So I want to come back on the thing about prime ministers and sort of coming together in CARICOM. So do you think that the pushback on your perspective, you think it will get people to be discussing the sort of the essence of what you say there, which would be
Well,
a
I
good
mean,
thing?
from looking at all the hysterical comments, absolutely hysterical. I mean, it really shows the kind of cult-like nature we're dealing with. But and there are some people, who you can say, this is black, and you can show them it's black, and they'll say no, it's white, and what else can you do? I show them the newspapers, show them the federal election results, and they deny it, and whatever, right? That's fine. But there are many other people who are absolutely glad to have this history uncovered, and so and I mean it for what this is, and this is important for the present. I mentioned the U.S. warships, and we talked about CARICOM. Right, so there's this weird discourse being put out by the PNM and the Guardian that somehow Prime Minister Kamla Persad-Bissessar is undermining CARICOM, when CARICOM leaders are actually not standing up strong in defense of Guyana's territorial integrity, when they and they are willing, it appears they're willing to let Maduro take the 2/3 that he's already claimed. They've already claimed it in Venezuela. I don't know if they've claimed it. As far as they're concerned, it's already Venezuela's, and they're just biding their time to walk in. But in their constitution, in their maps, that is Venezuela now. So for them, they have already claimed it. They just physically haven't gone and taken it. That's where it's reached, and Kamla Persad-Bissessar is the only CARICOM leader who has stood with Guyana and said no. And if the U.S., and we know we can't militarily defeat Venezuela, we can't. But if the U.S. are going to defend Guyana, because we can't, we don't have the army, we don't have the navy, we will facilitate it. Just like in Grenada, right? When we couldn't really overthrow the Accord government to restore democracy after they murdered Maurice Bishop and had that counter coup. We couldn't do it, but it was the Americans who restored democracy in Grenada.
And the point I omitted to make is that Barbados, Grantley Adams Airport was the staging front for it. You went there.
Yes.
You went there to see because it happened with me and a couple of other Caribbean journalists. We in Barbados, but we have to go to the airport every morning. And there was a major black, I'll never forget it. He would pick who among us would get to go to Grenada today.
Right.
So that Barbados played an essential role in that, because they allowed the action to take place in Barbados.
And if that didn't happen, the Accord government would have stayed in power. We were not going to remove them. CARICOM was not going to remove Accord. CARICOM was not going to restore democracy in Grenada. Sad to say, but that's the truth, and that's the and it's a similar hard truth we have to face about narco trafficking in the Caribbean. We can't do it. And that's a sad truth, something we have to face up to. It's just, again, like when Trump talks about NATO and the Europeans not funding their own defense and relying on America to defend them. We're kind of in the same position. We're not really funding our defense, the defense of our waters, and it's just been infested with.
So how do you dissect the notion that what is happening now is a threat to this concept of the Caribbean being a zone of peace, and that the Prime Minister is doing things to affect that.
Well, okay. One of the things about that too is that it's not only Trinidad and Tobago, it's Guyana as well. Right? We are 2 founding members of CARICOM. We are 2 of the leading economies. We are 2 of the largest members. So we're not undermining CARICOM, right? There's a difference of opinion in CARICOM. Right? So they don't get to define what CARICOM is, right? And that's another point of why I embarked on this critique, because they act as though they have some right to define CARICOM and what is CARICOM, and we don't. We do have the right to define. We are part of CARICOM. We are head of government in CARICOM, and we have and we stand with Guyana. Guyana also welcomes the U.S. forces in the Caribbean. So it's not only us. We stand. Guyana stands for and supports it, and then also we stand with Guyana against Venezuelan aggression, because they have already, as we stated earlier, they've already said that it's theirs. They're just waiting to take it. So we're saying no. CARICOM didn't. As far as I know, they did not say no. They're saying wait until the result of a judgment. And I suppose if the judgment goes in Venezuela's favor, they'll say too bad. I don't know. They'll say too bad, Guyana. It's I'm not sure. I don't think Guyana would give up its territory in that way. So that's a real crisis there. But we stand with Guyana. So yeah. So CARICOM is not being undermined. There's a difference of opinion, and so that has to be resolved. And what Prime Minister Kamala Persad-Dessessa said is that given this difference of opinion, she's not seeking to impose her opinion on others, right? This is a national issue. We are under a state of emergency because of the effects of narco trafficking. Right, there's there's a loud microphone coming through the neighborhood here.
Somebody's passing,
yeah,
advertising something.
Yeah.
I'm hearing it in the background.
All right. He broke my concentration totally. But yeah, what she was saying is that every state can come to its own position, but we are in a state of emergency because of the effects of narco trafficking on our society. Because it is narco trafficking, because the drug problem here is due to narco trafficking. We are a major transshipment point for drugs going to Europe and to America, and that is how many business people in this country have been operating, and that is an open secret that people have known for a long time, and we have to and we have to crack down on it. And this is thankfully part of that. I mean, we have a state of emergency. We have the lowest murder rate for August in 10 years. That's brilliant news. So in 10 years, coincidentally, that's when last we were in government. So we've brought the murder rate has been brought down back to that level, and we hope that it will continue. So this fits in very well into our own war on crime.
So you think there'll come a point where, let's say, our neighbors will come to understand it, or appreciate what the possibilities might be, what sort of, the foreboding?
Well, I hope so, but I think our neighbors have actually misunderstood the Grenada situation, right? Unfortunately, the propaganda about Grenada, it's just like we misunderstand Federation in 58 and the Gomes government in 1950. They misunderstand the Grenada situation in 83. They think it was a U.S. invasion of Grenada because I don't know why. It wasn't because of natural resources or anything. They wanted a nutmeg or something. It was because of that coup by the Cord faction murdering Maurice Bishop, taking over, and the country was in total shock, and the revolution was betrayed. The revolution was betrayed. So and that's what and that was the intervention there. But I don't think that story has been properly told. It's been spun into some anti-American narrative, but that's not what it is. So I do hope, and so that would depend on us getting our message out as well, and making sure our message is clear. So I do hope they do come around and see it, but I know that there's a lot of counter messaging as well. So let's hope that the truth prevails. Ultimately, I believe the truth always prevails. I think any God-fearing person all must believe that is the basis of belief in God, that in the end truth always prevails. Lies will always be exposed, and that's why you stand for the truth. You don't believe that the evil will win. In the end, the good will win. So you have to continue with
we
that.
gotta go, but let me just say that I for one, I'm looking forward to the next CARICOM summit.
Yeah, we'll see what happens there. Yeah, the heads of government.
All right, Dr. Kirk
Right.
Meighoo,
Andy,
thank you very much.
Andy, before Dr. Meighoo,
Yeah.
Meighoo goes, I just like to ask a question because of the fact that, for a lot of us, and a lot of the listeners, and a lot of people who may not be of that time, trying to understand this whole thing of the federation with the West Indian colonies. Dr. Meighoo, can you just kind of explain it, how that actually worked? How did the different colonies, how did we reach to the first premiers, Dr. Grantley Adams, and where Trinidad and Tobago was concerned, 1956, I think we had an election where Dr. Williams was elected or at that point in time. And I hope I'm not asking too much, but also when
I enjoy this stuff, man, so you could keep me here for hours.
So when we reached to the point of 58 and the federation actually coming and the appointment of Dr. Grantley Adams, what did that mean for Trinidad and Tobago? If Dr. Williams was our leader, did he have to step down? I don't know if you, go ahead.
Right, I understand. Yeah, because it is confusing. It is, right? So let's just think of what a federation is. Right? The federal, like for instance, in America, you had 13 different colonies. And especially near the beginning, in the early days, they definitely saw themselves as different countries. And to this day, each state, they have their own drinking age, driving thing. They in many ways, they are very different. And they, according to the Constitution, it's like they're different countries. And the same thing in Canada. And so that's what the federal government was like. And that's what the Federation of the West Indies would be like. So, just as in, let's say in Canada, each province has its own education, right? So it's not controlled by the federal government. Education is controlled by the provincial government. Just like in the States, education is not controlled by the federal government. It's controlled by the state governments, right? And so you have this division of powers in the federal structure. So if we want to take it from 56, but we can go from 1950 probably, because from 1950 with the Albert Gomes government, which again is erased sadly from our history, but they were very much involved in the negotiations of what this federation would be like, right? And politics before the PNM, and which I write about in my book on the history of Trinidad and Tobago politics from 1921 to 2001. Before the PNM, politics in Trinidad and Tobago, and I guess the rest of the Caribbean, was very much decentralized, was very much full of independent parties, localized parties. It was a much more vibrant thing than a two-party system, right? It was not a two-party system. It was very fluid, very dynamic, and that was the mentality of the politics. And Eric Williams, in fact, hated that, and the PNM was meant to overturn that, which it did, sadly, in my view. But that view, I guess, carried into the federal project, because it was, okay, let's give each island autonomy. Let's give them, that's why, the PNM have been so much throughout their history against, the autonomy for Tobago and so forth, and wants control under central government. And that's been a struggle there. So, yeah, but the federal government and the Federation of the West Indies, which was negotiated by all the territories, and at that time representing Trinidad was Albert Gomes. Right, so they had this kind of loose federal structure, which was very much like the United States and Canada, and etc. And when Eric Williams came in 1956 as chief minister in that election, Federation hadn't yet been inaugurated. He was chief minister of Trinidad. Right, so we had But in 58, there were federal elections. So it's just like, if you're familiar with American politics or Canadian politics, you have, let's even take Trinidad politics, right? So it's like local government elections, right? So you're electing local government, and that you do that on a different day than you have your national elections, right? So it's so similar. So Trinidad and Tobago elections all of a sudden became local elections, territorial elections, because the bigger elections was the federal elections. So in 1958, we had our first federal elections, and you had political parties. You had two main political parties: the West Indian Federal Labor Party, of which the PNM were a part, and the PNP in Jamaica, and I believe it was the Barbados Labor Party. I believe it was the BLP. I could be mistaken, but I believe it was the BLP. So the BLP, the PNP, and the PNM were the major parties of the West Indian Federal Labor Party. And then you had the West Indian Democratic Labor Party, DLP. And that's how the local DLP was formed. It was formed because of the federal election. Because there was Gomes's POPPG, there was Bades Miraj's PDP, there was Victor Bryan, who was heading the TLP, which was Cipriani's old party. You had the Butler Party, so you had these other parties. And Butler's party didn't join the DLP, but the DLP came together that way. So you had the elections. Everybody voted so you had elections up and down the West Indies. I can find the date of the election. I believe it was in March, if I'm not mistaken, 58. And the winner was, in the entire territory, in the entire federation, it was the West Indian Federal Labor Party, led by Grantley Adams. So Williams was campaigning in Trinidad for Grantley Adams to be prime minister, right? If you look at the newspaper reports in the 1958 federal elections. So he was the local, right? So even Norman Manley in Jamaica, right? So I can't remember who there. Norman Manley would have been campaigning for Grantley Adams to be prime minister again, because Norman Manley stayed in Jamaica as premier of Jamaica. So in 58, you had a prime minister of the federation. You had Ashford Sinanan would have been prime minister had the West Indian, the the FDLP won, had the Federated Democratic Labor Party won. Ashford Sinanan would have been prime minister, but he was leader of opposition. So in the federal parliament, the federal parliament had 45 seats, and the Senate was very much like the American Senate. If you know the American political system, the Senate has 2 representatives from each state, no matter what the population. But the lower state, the lower house, the Congress, that's divided by population. So in the Senate of the West Indies, each island had 2 representatives, no matter what your size, right? So you had that, and that was nominated, that was not elected. So you had that, the Senate, you had the lower house, which was elected. And, and so we were going well, but Bustamante kept agitating. He did not want Jamaica to be in the Federation. He wanted Jamaica. He didn't like all them small islanders. There's a very famous cartoon of a kind of giant pig, a sow, and all these sucklings, which are all the little islands sucking off Jamaica, right? So that was the So that was the notion that they had, that all those islands were going to be sucking off Jamaica, and they wanted to be independent on their own. They're big enough. I mean, to this day, if you go abroad, people, when you say you're from the Trinidad, they say, what part of Jamaica is that from? Right? I mean, so many people, all they know about the Caribbean is Jamaica. So, Jamaica has that sense of itself, and, the importance of reggae and Jamaican culture, they have that sense. And so they wanted separate. They didn't want to be tied up with all these other islands. So they left in 61. And as I gave the story, Williams didn't like how the federation was structured. He wanted it to be centralized. So he didn't want to continue with the federation. He said 1 from 10 leaves naught. And so then we went ahead. So that decision was made in January 62. And then by May, the conference was set up in the UK. And by August, the independence happened by the August.
Right. So in when we did have that federation election, everybody voted.
Yeah.
And at the end of it, so when it was set up there, what did that mean for the governance structure for Trinidad and Tobago that Dr. Meighoo was championing at that point in time?
So what that meant was that we would have been independent as a federation, and the local territorial governments would have had, I can't remember what the division was, but let's take like the Canada, right? So in Canada, the provincial government, like the government of Ontario, has control over, drinking age, over the roadways, over education, and certain aspects of the economy. But like defense, that would be federal. What else would be federal? I can't remember, but there are certain responsibilities that are federal. Foreign affairs, of course, that's federal.
I understand what you're talking about. Something just like Ministry of Works, where you have minor roads and highways and
correct.
That's amazing.
Yeah. So it would have been like that. So we would have been independent, and each premier would have had, would have been like, the mayor of Port of Spain in a sense, with a bigger budget. I mean, when you look at it, the mayor of New York has a bigger budget probably than the prime minister of Trinidad and Tobago, and certainly has more people to take care of. So when you look at it by scale, it's interesting to make those kind of comparisons. But yeah, it would be like that with different levels.
Yeah, man. Thanks much for the clarity.
You're welcome. My pleasure.
All right. Lessons here in our political history. Very great, man. Good.
Yeah. I was telling my son, who is going in upper 6, I was telling him, this is a great thing about Trinidad. What I love so much about Trinidad, because I spent many years abroad. I grew up abroad, in fact, and I left in 1990 to come and live here from after the coup. During the coup, in fact, during the state of emergency, that's where I came, and I worked in Serval with the Beetham, and I said, I'm staying here for good. My family thought I was crazy. My family in Trinidad and my family abroad, but I said, no, I'm staying here. But yeah, and one of the things is the debate, the quality of debate. I said, could you imagine? There would never be a front page paper talking about a debate on George Washington or John A. Macdonald or something. They're concerned about like Kim Kardashian or whatever. I don't know who the latest people they talk about are now. But I mean, we still talk, like when I hark back to, when Eric Williams galvanized this country in 55, it was a debate with Dom Basil Matthews in City Hall, or the library, I think it was, about Aristotle and education. I mean, that is incredible. That appetite for education and that passion for history and knowledge, it's amazing, and I love it. And I love that in Trinidad and Tobago we are so passionate about it, and that this absorbs us. I think it's great, and it's much better than in other countries where it's football whatever TV show or whatever. This is substantive. This is substantive, and I think it's great.
And so you don't, if I squeeze this one in, you don't get uptight, and you don't take it personally when people crisscross your views and your angles.
Okay. Insults mixed with ignorance, of course you don't like it, right? But where it's a genuine, real debate, yeah, I love it. It's great. It's great.
Yeah.
When you're really talking about issues, of course, that's excellent, and that's necessary. You know, it's necessary and it's important. But when people just sort of insult you and they don't know anything what they're talking about, you know, that
that's a different thing, a different kettle of fish, as they say.
That's right.
All right. Dr. Meighoo, thanks once again.
Okay.
So Charles, it's up to you.
Okay, Andy, thank you so much, and thank you, Dr. Meighoo, for passing through and sharing your thoughts and your insight with us here.
My pleasure. You know, you can always have me on again to talk about this or any other issues. I'll be glad to.
No problem. We will definitely extend that invitation to you. So thank you so much. It's been greatly appreciated.
Take care.
All right, Andy, thank you very much.
You're very welcome, man. That's scholarship worth anything. Good.
Okay, people, thank you very much, and stay with us here on New Era TT Radio. This has been the DriveTime Exchange.
Away from the Federation, Jamaica have a right to speak she mind. That is my opinion. And if you believe in democracy, you'll agree with me. But if they know they didn't want federation, and they know they don't want to unite as one and only one, tell the doctor you're not in favor, and don't behave like a blasted traitor. How the devil you mean you are federating no more? Whoa, whoa, whoa. Swing it out, boys. Whoa, whoa, whoa. La 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 la.